heck yes, nurses need to run for office. They need to be advocates. They need to be activists. They need to stand up. Nurses must pay attention to politics, because politics is certainly paying attention to nursing.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Rosa DiDonato.
And I'm Marian Leary.
And you're listening to Amplify Nursing, a Penn nursing podcast supported by the Pinola Fund for Innovation in Nursing.
Amplify Nursing features nurses who are leading the way in science, policy, and innovation.
Our guests defy stereotypes, define practice, and disrupt convention.
We highlight the breadth and depth of nursing influence on society by amplifying nurses who are pushing boundaries and breaking down barriers to build a new paradigm.
Pennsylvania State Senator Maria Collett has spent her entire career in the service of others. As a clerk in family court, then Deputy Attorney General in Camden County, she worked tirelessly to protect children and advocate for families. Her experience inspired her to seek out a more direct way to positively impact people. After graduating from Drexel University, she began her career as a nurse, eventually working in trauma, long-term care, and pediatric home health. In 2018, she was elected to the Pennsylvania State Senate, representing Senate District 12. Today, we talk to the senator about her journey, her drive to advocate for the citizens of Pennsylvania, and the responsibility nurses have to use their collective voice in political discourse.
Senator Collett, thank you so much for talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So I'd love to start out just by learning more about your background and what led you, because you have two different degrees. You have a degree in law and a nursing degree, which I always find fascinating when nurses have multiple educational lenses to draw from. So I'd love to hear more about just your upbringing and then your path to those two educational degrees.
Sure. So, you're right. I do have sort of a varied background. And after college, I went to law school. I had always been really interested in advocacy work and really trying to figure out a way to help specifically women and children. That was the area that I really wanted to focus on. And there were so many areas that I knew I could go into, but law seemed to be a place where I felt I could make a real significant impact. And so I applied to law school, went to law school, was very happy afterward to do a clerkship in family court. It felt like just the place I wanted to be. I was learning about child custody issues, learning about the issues surrounding families and abuse and neglect, those kinds of things. And then from there, I transitioned to a role as a Deputy Attorney General in New Jersey, and specifically in Camden County, New Jersey, where I represented the state in abuse and neglect cases. So when a child was removed from a home for allegations of abuse or neglect, I would represent the state. That was always the lens that I approached my work from, and occasionally I did participate in cases where we did terminate parental rights, but those were, in my experience with the Attorney General's office, very few and far between. We worked very hard to make sure that families that were in need had the resources that would really help them. And as my time went on there, I realized that for me personally, I wanted to do something that had much more of an immediate impact in the lives of people. And so I started to sort of look around and see what kind of helping profession I could go into. I had a friend at the time who was a family doctor, and he said, come and shadow me and let's see what you might like to do. And he had encouraged me to go to medical school, but after going around with him to nursing homes, hospitals, doctor visits in his office, I realized that the nursing care was really the thing that spoke to that need, that inner need that I felt to be of service. That to me was the place where I felt like my compassion, my integrity, my work in advocating for people, and my knowledge and skills could really be put to use. I really felt like that was a place for me. And so I decided to leave the legal profession and go to nursing school, which of course for my parents was, a big shift, and they were thinking, oh my goodness, like what's going to happen here? But ultimately, I graduated from Drexel in Philadelphia and went on to become a pediatric home health nurse, a level 1 trauma nurse, then worked in long-term care and loved every second at the bedside. And so the transition then to legislator really is much more natural than it looks on paper when you see the background of advocacy and sort of helping professions that I really always tried to find myself in. I knew that as a state legislator, I would have the opportunity to speak with a louder voice and a bigger platform to the people in my community who were in need and people who needed support. And so that's why I ran. I said, I feel like I'm a good voice for this, and I feel like it's something that I can do. And I decided to step into the fray, as they say, and I'm really honored to have the opportunity to represent the people in my district and the people of the Commonwealth, really, when it comes down to it, in these issues that I think are so critical to our ability to operate as good, strong families and members of our community.
So can I ask, where does this draw to be of service come from? You've chosen 3 different sort of careers that all draw on being an advocate, being of service to people. Where is that? Is that based out of your family upbringing, or where do you think that comes from?
Definitely. My mother grew up in Buffalo, New York. She was the oldest of 3 children to a very poor family. And my mother's father suffered an injury as a child that left him as an amputee. He lost one leg at the hip. And so when many men his age were going off to World War II and coming back with sort of the benefits of having been a veteran and serving the country, my mother's father didn't have that. He wasn't able to sort of exercise those opportunities that were available to other men his age. And so he toiled. He was a worker. He was a small business owner, had a deli for a short time. He worked in factory jobs, whatever it took. My mother would tell me stories of being a young girl and going to the rural communities up there, picking strawberries, picking raspberries, whatever it took to help to bring income into the family. So not only was my mother's family very poor, but her sister was born with intellectual disability. And so they had this child of special need in the home, and were struggling financially to try to make a good life for all of them. My mother was the first in her family to go to college, and she did so on scholarships because she studied her butt off in high school to be the valedictorian of her class. She went on to State University of New York in Buffalo, SUNY Buffalo, and did that on scholarship, graduated. She was the first person to get that education, and because of that, she was able to provide, when she married my father, she and my father were able to provide a middle-class lifestyle for my brother and I. My father was an immigrant to this country from Greece, came over at a time when there was significant poverty in the village that he was raised in Greece, but came over here for educational opportunity and realized after earning a PhD that he and my mother together as hard workers, people who were industrious, smart, and dedicated, could really build a good life for their children. And I never lost those lessons growing up, that we are here to make sure we can uplift our whole community, that it is not about one person getting an education and sort of getting out, quote unquote. It is about making sure that we are looking behind us, pulling everyone that we can up with us, up behind us. And so for me, it is really about that. So whether I was advocating for children who were in need and families who were in need, or whether I was advocating at the bedside for a patient who found themselves in the hospital unexpectedly and didn't know who was going to be at home to feed their pets, or didn't know how they were going to ever get back on their feet to get back to work because they were a single paycheck to paycheck earner. And, and I found myself in the position where I was advocating for their whole life, right? Getting them back to being whole, getting them back to a place where they could achieve and succeed. And these issues of poverty and health care weren't going to hold them back, weren't going to be the things that kept them from living that quality of life that every one of us so richly deserves.
Can you talk a little bit about what you do now as a state senator in Pennsylvania and how your nursing lens adds to that work?
Absolutely. As a legislator, I have the really unique opportunity to influence the laws that affect the people in our Commonwealth from the inside. It's something. I have an 8-year-old son, and when he asks, what do? I tell him I go to Harrisburg and I work with people to make the laws for our state. And what I have, I mean, it's such an incredible privilege to be able to negotiate with my colleagues on my side and the other side of the aisle, to negotiate with different groups that have interest in making sure that when laws are passed, they are passed with fairness and equity in mind. And having the ability to work on those things, to approach the governor and say, as someone who has been advocating for people my whole adult career, to have the opportunity to have the ear of the governor to say, hey, the people in my community are suffering in this way, and this is the relief that could really help them. Now, I don't always get what I want. Of course, that's part of, being an adult and learning compromise and negotiation. But to have that opportunity to really be in a position and a place where I'm able to voice the concerns of the people in my community at a very large level and through a big megaphone is incredibly important. As a nurse, I bring a perspective of uniqueness, really. There are only 3 nurses in the legislature, myself, Senator Judy Ward, who represents Blair County, and then Representative Bridget Kozorowski in Lackawanna. And so this, the 3 of us, I think, bring very unique perspective. We know what it feels like to be in the hospital, treating people during a 12 or 14-hour shift and making sure that we have the needs of our family met, the needs of our patients met, the needs of my patient's family met. And so all of those things really do influence the type of legislation that I vote on, that I advocate for, that I try to propose amendments to, and even that I introduce myself, because it's really about what can I do, what can I bring to the table that's going to help people move forward in their lives. I will just say, as a quick aside, being a nurse comes in incredibly handy. Last year, when we were on the floor of the Senate, our lieutenant governor unfortunately had an episode where he passed out at the rostrum, fell down, and it was really very, helpful that I was there and able to sort of get up to the podium, make sure that we put him in a position where he was able to be safe and help to, make sure that he was coming out of everything okay, get the fluids into him that he needed. And he, of course, he didn't pass out completely. He just had a dizzy spell, really, and we were able to get him up and out of the Senate chamber safely. But it was really great to be able to offer that experience and that expertise at a time of need. And a few times in my role as a candidate first and now as a state senator, I have found that those nursing skills come in handy with treating people, at the scene of big rallies or at an event if someone, finds themselves in need of some medical assistance. So being a nurse always comes in handy. Certainly it does as a legislator as well.
Nurses are never off duty.
Indeed.
And speaking of that, never being off duty, I mean, now we're in the midst of this, awful pandemic that's been going on for months and months and months. What are your thoughts about the pandemic and specifically related to how Governor Wolf and the state has really handled that response?
I have to say that early on, Governor Wolf and Dr. Levine, their concerted efforts at the beginning to wrap their arms around the science of this, despite that we didn't know a lot in the beginning, their willingness to enter this with authority and say, here's what we're going to need to do, and it's going to require sacrifice from the citizens of our Commonwealth, was really, to me, very empowering. It really made me feel like, great, we have leaders in our state that are interested in the health and well-being of the people in my community. And so that was really something that I grasped onto immediately. I think as time has gone on, right now we're sort of 6 months past that beginning phase where we all were kind of figuring it out. I think as time has gone on, the inequities that have always existed in terms of medical care, in terms of our communities of color and different populations being more adversely affected than other communities, those things have become even more glaring with the coronavirus pandemic. And so I think what we need to do now is move to a place where we take the lessons we've learned here and implement them. And that means making sure that, we have safe staffing levels in our hospitals and in our nursing homes, making sure that people have access to quality health care, making sure that we're removing stigma and barriers so that people who have historically found themselves unable to access health care don't have that experience going forward. That includes mental health and making sure that we're making mental health care a priority as we've seen our children stay home and not participate in school, not participate in summer camps. We know that there are going to be long-term mental health and short-term mental health effects from that. We've got to be ready and armed to ensure that we are providing resources for people. Prescription drug affordability, making sure that people are able to access. Great, we've made COVID testing free here for everyone in the Commonwealth so that people can get COVID testing. Let's make sure that we are, those medications, even if they're experimental, that we're using to treat these illnesses, let's make sure that we're making that affordable for people. And of course, I am the chair of the Senate Aging and Youth Committee, and so aging with dignity and integrity has been an incredible focus of mine. And when I see what's going on in nursing homes around our Commonwealth, I have to say that in many ways, I am really I'm humbled by the incredible work so many of our nursing homes have done to keep people safe. That being said, I understand the hardship that is placed upon families when they're unable to visit their loved ones because of quarantine or, lockdown, as we've, sort of referred to it as. But keeping in mind the safety and health of everyone in our community, and that includes our healthcare workers who are treating the people that live in our residential facilities, making sure that we're keeping that in the forefront and understanding that the sacrifices we make now really will make sure that we come out of this on the other side stronger, that we're able to, move about our communities in ways that are safe and with the health of our loved ones in mind. Those are all things that are going to have to go hand in hand. And so when I look at this crisis, when I look at this pandemic, I realize, as so many of us have, and what I always believed to be true, that our frontline workers they are essential. And that's not just our healthcare workers. That's people that are working in our grocery stores. That's people that are working as our transportation workers, getting our frontline workers to and from home and their shifts at the hospital or the nursing home. That includes our delivery personnel. My own family used grocery delivery. Thankfully, we were able to do that. But those people, again, that were able to do that grocery shopping and bring it to our home initially to make sure that we were able to maintain safety and that we were able to socially distance from others so that we wouldn't be, unnecessarily exposing people. All of those things have really made us, and especially, myself and many of my colleagues in the Senate, it's really made us stand up, take notice with wide eyes about what it is that we need to do as we move forward to make sure that this pandemic, despite all of the negativity that has come with it, really does have a significantly positive impact on the way that we deal with people and health as we move forward.
We hope you're enjoying this episode, and we'll be back with more in a few minutes after this quick break.
Hey, I'm Dan Gorenstein, host of the podcast Trade-Offs. I've been reporting on healthcare for years, and here's what I know about our system. It's costly, it's complicated, and a lot of the time, it's counterintuitive, especially in the time of a pandemic. Each week, we look at the data, the evidence, with people who best understand it, and tell stories about some of the country's toughest health policy problems. Subscribe to Trade-Offs wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, podcast friends. We at the Amplify Nursing Podcast are performing a listener survey, and we want to hear from you. Please take a few minutes to tell us how you feel about the podcast. It will help us provide you a better listening experience. You can access the short survey on our website at nursing.upenn.edu/podcast. I'm wondering how you feel about Governor Wolf's executive order regarding lifting supervision for advanced practice nurses and how that might affect nursing legislation that's currently waiting for a vote.
Yeah, I absolutely, look, I'm a big proponent and have been since I entered the legislature of professionals practicing to the full extent of their licenses. And so to me, if it is an issue of training or testing to ensure that people that are acting as advanced practice nurses have the qualifications, skills, and ability to adequately, effectively, and safely treat people, to me, that's a different issue. Right now, we have testing and training in place. We have entrusted our advanced practice nurses with a high level of patient care, and I think they're up to the task. And so to me, this is really removing one more barrier to accessible health care. So I think it's really critical that we stay the course here, that we do what we need to do to make sure that our advanced practice nurses have the resources available to them and that they're able to practice to the fullest extent of their licenses. You know, one of the things we've heard so much about are these communities that have been disproportionately affected because their access to medical care is more limited. And if we can, in this way, make sure that trained, skilled, advanced practice nurses are accessible in these communities and can provide the medical care that's necessary, then I say there's no reason for us not to do it. And I think, to be very honest, in my experience with the advanced practice nurses with whom I interacted in hospital levels, in pediatric home health, and in nursing homes, you know, every one of these professionals is working hard at providing the best level of quality care that he or she can provide to their patients. And I'm a firm believer that you don't enter this line of work unless you really feel a strong calling to care of your patient. And that's, you know, in the whole sense of that word. And so to me, this is just one more way that we're empowering healthcare professionals. And we're saying to people who want to enter this profession, Pennsylvania is a place that welcomes you. Our Commonwealth welcomes your expertise, your diligence, and your compassion, and your dedication. My goodness, your dedication to this type of work. We welcome you. We want you here. And we're going to do what it takes to support you through that.
So do you think then more nurses should get into politics and run for office so that they can have this type of voice to move these bills and these orders through?
Absolutely. I think one of the things this pandemic has underscored for us really is the need for nurses to be heard in the halls of our legislature. Their experiences at the bedside really can translate to transformative policy. And so speaking up, and they don't necessarily have to run for office, although I welcome it. I would love to see more nurse colleagues in the legislature. But even as activists and advocates, this is what nurses are trained to do. We're trained to stand up and say, wait a minute, I have looked at the information in this patient's chart. I've talked with this patient. I've observed him or her. And here's my professional expertise and opinion on the best care for this person. And that's what our Commonwealth needs. Our Commonwealth needs the best care it can get, and we need to have people who are strong and fierce advocates for quality stand up and say this is, and quality in every arena, whether it's patient care, whether it's, making sure our families are thriving, making sure that our businesses and our business communities are thriving. These are things that nurses know about. We understand how all of those things intersect. I mentioned before, when a trauma patient found him or herself in the hospital bed, and me standing there, doing the vital signs, often they said, when do I get back to work? Who's taking care of my pets at home? Has anyone notified my wife? Does my job know I'm here? These are things that we understand the intersection of. Unless and until those things can be dealt with for that patient's mind, that patient's ability to heal and thrive is compromised. And so when we have nurses and nurse voices in the halls of our legislature, we are looking at all of those facets of a person's life and figuring out how we can make every piece of those fit together to provide a real positive impact on people. So heck yes, nurses need to run for office. They need to be advocates. They need to be activists. They need to stand up. Nurses must pay attention to politics, because politics is certainly paying attention to nursing.
So I'm curious then, your thoughts on the ANA not endorsing a presidential candidate for this election. They haven't done that in a while, and they decided again not to do that for this election. I'm wondering what your thoughts on that is, being that nurses really should be speaking up, being advocates and activists based on the climate that we're currently living in.
I have to say I find it to be disappointing, because one thing we do know is that our current administration and our current president has, pushed aside science in so many ways. We've seen it. It is in the news. We have lost the lives of 205,000 Americans and counting to this disease, unfortunately. We've seen other nations battle this pandemic, and we've seen them do it effectively and efficiently based on science. And so, to me, it is a real disservice to say to nurses around our Commonwealth, around our nation, that they don't have a voice here, because that's really what it's saying. When the ANA says we're not endorsing a candidate, they're saying we don't formulate an opinion on either one of these people. And I find that to be unfortunate, because I don't think that I'm alone in saying that many of us, nurses and lay people alike, have formulated the opinion that a president who doesn't operate in the time of a pandemic with science and, the understanding of healthcare efficiencies in mind is someone who is not serving the American people. So I think I wish they had endorsed. I wish they had endorsed a candidate to say to nurses around our nation, stand up, get involved, pay attention. This impacts you. It impacts you in your wages. It impacts you in the patient load you're going to have. It impacts you on the PPE and other equipment that you're going to need when dealing with, people during this pandemic. And it impacts you on, how healthcare is viewed in this country and what your place in that healthcare, process really is. So I find it to be disappointing, frankly.
If nurses wanted to get more involved in politics, how would you suggest they start?
Well, I would say that finding an issue that is important to them, whether that is nursing related or not. And so if it's something like, nurse staffing ratios in your unit, and you find that, like, hey, wait a minute, is anyone speaking to this? Start right on the internet, start researching, and are there legislators who are talking about this? Are there groups, activist groups, that are talking about this? Are there, different organizations that have said, hey, this is an issue that's important to us. And again, if it's not a nursing issue, if it's wage equity, if it's Black Lives Matter, if it is police reform, if it's criminal justice reform, start looking. What are the groups that are talking about this? And what are they saying about it? Do I agree with the standpoint that they're offering? Is this a group I'd like to get involved with? And start volunteering. Just say, hey, I'm showing up. What can I do? Can I, mail envelopes? Can I print flyers? Can I make phone calls to interested parties who want to hear more on this topic? And it is something that each and every one of us struggles with, right? Where do I find the time to do it? I'm working a full-time job that requires significant physical energy from me. I'm caring for my family, and I have other activities that I'm interested in. Where do I find the time? And that goes really back to making sure that nurses are prioritizing their voice, making sure they're prioritizing their activism, because it is so impactful. So really just find that issue that is important to you and start researching who else is talking about this issue. And my goodness, if no one else is talking about that issue, then you start your own organization. You can start a website that says, hey, come and join me so that we can talk about, this issue that's really important. And you'll find there are other people that are interested in that. It's the same thing as, when we were in school and someone said, never be afraid to ask a question, because I bet there's someone else out there in the class who has the same question, and maybe that person just isn't raising their hand. So raise your hand. Be the first to say, this is something that I think is really compelling, and it's something that impacts us. And who else is out there that's like-minded? Let's talk about how to make change here.
The election's coming up in, just about a month. Are there any tips, any thoughts you want to relay to listeners about what they need to do to get ready to vote, either in Pennsylvania, because now we have the whole naked ballot issue, or just generally across the country?
So I would say there are several things here in our Commonwealth that are really of critical importance. Number one, we passed legislation that changed our ballots so that there is no more straight party voting. You used to be able to go into the voting booth and press the R button and vote for all Republican candidates, or press the D button and vote for all Democratic candidates. You were done, you walked out, you left. We don't do that anymore. Now you must vote every single candidate. And I would encourage people to, when they look at their ballots and they see who is running for office, that they go all the way down. Make sure you're voting all the way down ballot, because when we vote for president, that's of course incredibly important. But let's face it, the saying all politics is local has become a saying because it really is. And we need to make sure that we are looking at local elections, we're looking at state elected officials, and we're making sure we're filling out our ballot completely to vote for those people. The other thing that I would say is, as you said, our whole mail-in balloting process has changed. And I would encourage people to, if they've registered, to get their mail-in ballot. Again, you'll get an instruction sheet that comes with that. Follow those rules. Make sure that your ballot is counted. Make sure you're getting it back early. Several of our counties across the Commonwealth have set up drop boxes so people are able to drop their ballot off. Remember, you can't take other people's ballots, but you can take your own. And then the other thing that I would say is really critically important is figure out who you want to vote for, right? Do that research. The League of Women Voters is an incredible nonpartisan organization that usually puts together some voting guides, and they tell us, who is running in our area and what those people stand for, if they've been legislators, what kind of votes they've taken in the legislature. So you can have a really good sense of who it is that you're supporting to put into office. And you can just look up the League of Women Voters online and get that information, their voter guide. But those are the things that are really, something to keep in mind. And last, I'm going to say, if you're healthy, if you live in a household with people who are of low risk for COVID, go to the polls. It's okay to go to the polls. There are going to be social distancing measures. There are going to be safety measures in place. Wear your mask, bring your hand sanitizer. But of course, we want every single vote to count. And we want every single person who is exercising that, most American right that we all have to do so with the knowledge that their vote matters and that their vote is counting. And so whether you do it by mail-in and you do it by looking at your whole ballot and get your ballot in early or get it to a drop box, or whether you do go in person, make sure you vote. It's incredibly important, and it's not just important for the people that are seeking office. It's incredibly important for every one of us in the community to make sure we have good people with good ideas and good values that are representing us.
Well, Senator Collett, this was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and for all this great information leading up to the election.
Well, thank you so much. It has been my pleasure. And I really, please, I'd love to come back and talk to you another time if we have other issues to cover. I know we always do. So it's really been an incredible pleasure and honor to be here with you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Marion.
Hey, Angela, how's it going?
It's amazing. How are you?
I'm so good. We just had a great conversation with Senator Maria Collett, state senator from Pennsylvania, talking about why nurses should be in politics, the work she's doing in the Pennsylvania state legislature, the coronavirus, like upcoming election. It was like right in my wheelhouse. It was so exciting to talk to her.
It was a very rich conversation. And she's a really exciting legislator. I feel like she has such a strong background for advocacy, and it's so much about the community and making a positive impact for people and not necessarily about party politics or things like that, it's incredibly refreshing.
Yeah, and the work that she's done, she was a lawyer, she was a nurse, she's now state senator. All of those things really spoke to her as something she can do to be of service to others. And that clearly comes out in the work that she was talking about that she's doing in her position as the state senator in Pennsylvania, and also like why we need more nurses in these positions. And what she said really made sense. Yeah, it'd be great to have other nurses in elected positions, but more nurses should be speaking out, being activists and advocates, and we really need to use our voices in these different ways. And that really spoke to me, and I hope it speaks to our listeners as well. We really, as a profession, need to stand up, take a stand, and fight for inequity, social justice, and any of the health and healthcare issues that we hold near and dear to us.
I don't know that I have anything to say to that.
We should just end that there.
I think you should end it there.
Amplify Nursing is hosted by Dr. Angela Rosa DiDonato and Marion Leary, and produced by the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing, with special thanks to our Department of Information Technology Services for their assistance. Music for the podcast was created by Harper Leary. The podcast is made possible by the Krista and Rich Pinola Fund for Innovation in Nursing.
Follow us on Twitter at Penn Nursing. Until next time, keep pushing over, under, around, and through. We want to thank you for listening to the Amplify Nursing podcast and remind you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you enjoy your podcast listening. And if you can do us a solid, please rate and review us as well. It will go a long way in amplifying our episodes.